Love and marriage, love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. This I tell you, brother, you can't have one without the other. Love and marriage, love and marriage, it's an institute you can't disparage. Ask the local gentry, and they will say it's elementary. Try to separate them, it's an illusion. Try, and you will only come to this conclusion. Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. Dad was told by mother, you can't have one, you can't have none, you can't have one without the other. Try to separate them, it's an illusion. Try, and you will only come to this conclusion. Love and marriage go together like a horse and carriage. Dad was told by mother, you can't have one, you can't have one without the other.
Welcome once again to The Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. Data and social indicators tell us much about the state of relationships, marriages, and those living alone in the United States. Americans are now less likely to be married and more likely to live alone than at any time since the 1950s. A higher percentage of Americans are divorced, while a lower percentage are widows. In 1949, about 80% of all households had married couples. In 2022, it was down to 47%. And when people do marry, they're doing it later in life. Also, more than 500,000 same-sex couples are now married, which wasn't an option, of course, for people in the 1950s. Around 1 in 3 women and girls experience physical and or sexual violence in their lifetimes. Around 1 in 4 adult children are estranged for various periods of time from their parents. Gender-based violence, including child marriage and abuse of girls' and women's rights, are correlated into those parts of the country where a hyper-patriarchal masculinity is the dominant cultural norm. At the same time, in their loneliness and alienation, people intensely search for love, nurturing, connection, and close family and human contact. We need love for the well-being of our soul and psyche as much as we need oxygen for the survival of our physical bodies. Without it, we're dead humans walking. Our guest today on The Radical Imagination is a respected and renowned expert on the world of love, marriage, and relationships. Beatty Cohan Vrettos is an activist, a nationally recognized psychotherapist and sex therapist, author of the groundbreaking book, For Better, For Worse, Forever, Discover the Path to Lasting Love. She's the advice columnist for Dan's Papers in the Hamptons and Palm Beach. a national spokesperson, and national radio television expert guest. And most of all, she's my fantastic and fabulous wife. But even in addition to that, she is the host of the weekly Ask Beatty show on the Progressive Radio Network, and she has a private practice in New York City and East Hampton. And we'll be asking Beatty to comment on a number of really fascinating, provocative, interesting clips to understand our love relationships better and to have more fun and joy in the boudoir and bedroom. In the boudoir, yes. That's sort of an old-fashioned term, right? But it's the bedroom, right?
Right.
But thank you so very, very much, Beatty, for being here. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. There's so much to talk about. There's so much that we can learn from you on this. So thank you again.
Absolutely. And really, Jim, despite these depressing statistics, I want your audience to know that finding love is still absolutely possible. And of course, there are things that people have to learn and do if they ever hope to find a happy and loving and successful relationship, which is something we'll talk about in the show.
We will. Yeah, that's a great way to start our discussion. And you know what? I think what we'll do is move directly to one of my all-time favorite movies. As you well know, I've been talking about it. It's now playing. Yeah, okay. You've probably heard enough about it. But Umbrellas of with Catherine Deneuve in her first movie role. It's totally all sung in French. It was written in 1964. It came out. And it's now, again, as I say, it's been restored, 60 years restoration, and it's playing at the Film Forum here in New York, in Manhattan. Actually starting tomorrow, so for the Christmas season. And it is the final scene that we're going to be seeing here is one that has been that is depicting their final meeting, or a meeting that they haven't met each other, they haven't seen each other for many, many years. There's all kinds of things that happen in between. She gets married. He's off to war. The beautiful, beautiful music score of Michel Legrand, the award-winning music of I Will Wait for You, and so on. So enough of that, because I can keep on going on. So let us play the final clip here.
Françoise, reste tranquille. Le klaxon n'est pas un jeu. Il fait froid.
Viens au bureau.
Il fait meilleur ici. C'est la première fois que je reviens à Cherbourg depuis mon mariage. J'ai été chercher la petite chez ma belle-mère en Anjou. J'allais rentrer à Paris, puis j'ai fait ce détour. Je ne pensais pas te rencontrer. Il a fallu ce hasard.
Est-ce que je fais le plat pour madame Geneviève?
Oui, le plein,
Super ou ordinaire?
peu importe.
Ben, c'est comme je voudrais, super.
Oui. Il est joli cet arbre, c'est toi qui l'as décoré.
Non, c'est ma femme, enfin, c'est surtout pour le gosse.
Bien sûr,
Tu es en deuil,
maman est morte à l'automne.
comment l'as-tu appelée?
Françoise, elle a beaucoup de toi. Tu veux la voir?
Je crois que tu peux partir.
Toi, tu vas bien?
Oui, très bien.
All right. Listen, Beatty, need your help here. As you know, I'm wiped away. I get wiped away by this. But ask Beatty here.
I'm thinking,
What do you
maybe
think?
missed opportunities, bad timing. But look at what happened. I mean, they still obviously feel a connection and have feelings, but yet both of them were able to move on. They got married, they each had a child.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about life is that we can't change our history, Jim. It's about working through what didn't happen, the could have and the should have, and finding ways to move on so that we can live, happy and joyful and healthy and loving lives. This was it was a very emotional segment. Yes, very emotional.
I'll have to ask you here. I mean, and I hope our audience, especially with all these clips, so please pay attention to the interaction. I'm not saying you, but our audience really. The clips are going to be like, watch the facial expressions, the asides. And what I want to ask you is, when she leaves, she says, "Are you all right?"
Yes.
And he looks down. Of course, we don't know, but what I'm trying to express here is the complexity of love and first love and yearning and not working out, and yet yes, going on and finding love again. But that little clip there, within the clip of him being asked, "Are you okay?" and he responds, looks down, "I'm fine." Is he fine? fine.
Well, he in his life, he certainly may be okay, but it was a shock. I mean, she made a detour. This was not something planned. So they hadn't obviously seen each other in a long, long time. And here she pulls up to the gas station and there he is. You know, who would have ever dreamed that this detour would take her to him? Where they obviously, you know, who knows how many years had passed, but that they had had a very strong connection. And for whatever reasons, which we don't know, maybe they were too young at the time, maybe it was just not the right time. Um, they were able to go on with their lives, which is something that I try to encourage my patients to do all the time. You know, given the fact that we can't change our history. One of the things that I was wondering is whether or not her little girl may have been his child. And when she asked him, "Do you want to meet Francoise?" He didn't, and it was very clear at the end. He said, "You know, you better go."
Right.
And
He didn't want to see her.
right, right,
Not giving this away, but because everybody's got to go see the movies, and we're going to go see it.
right.
That is
right.
his child. And what?
Okay, so
Yes.
there you have it.
He is called to go to war, and the last night that they have in Cherbourg, she gets pregnant. He doesn't know about it, and then while he's gone, he gets injured as well. Her mother has, because in the movie she's 17 years old. She's mentioned as 17 years old. The mother says this is not the time for her to get married to him, but a very rich suitor comes along, and in fact, she does marry him, even though, of course, the song says, "If it takes forever, I will wait for you." So, Beatty, as we all know, love is also painful. It can get messy. So it's not just riding off into the sunset here, right?
Unfortunately, Jim, that is absolutely true. And you know, when you were citing some of the statistics that I talk about every single week on my Ask Beatty show on the Progressive Radio Network, I mean, we're looking at, I mean, the reality here. And I don't want to depress anybody, but we have to be real. And the reality is that we have a divorce rate for first marriages of 48%. People marrying for the second time, you know, you hopefully go into a second marriage and you're hoping that things are going to work out. But 67% of couples marrying for the second time also divorce. And then I'll say to people all the time, well, what do you think? What do you think happens when people marry, you know, 3 or more times? And the divorce statistic for third or more marriages is close to 72%. So obviously, you know, something is really off. Of course, I have good news, evidence-based news that we can actually talk about to help people to never make a mistake and love again. And then when you talk about the domestic violence statistics, you know, we've never had so much talk about mental health and relationships and domestic violence. And yet it is so painful for me as a woman that 3 women continue to be murdered every single day by their so-called intimate partner. And if we're looking at our kids, in the world of adolescence, almost 24% of adolescent girls, you know, talk about being in abusive relationships of various different kinds, whether or not we're talking about mentally abusive, physically abusive, sexually abusive. And these statistics hold for college co-eds as well. So clearly, we're all looking for love. We're all looking for connection, but something is really off. And what I have found, you know, I'll also talk about how, you know, through my work, through my research, through my clinical work, that there are really 3 things that people need to do if they ever hope to, you know, find a successful love match. And, the first thing is that each of us needs to be in a really good place emotionally and psychologically and psychiatrically. And we need to be willing to deal with our issues. And we all have issues, typically beginning and stemming from our own family of origin, whether we're talking about domestic violence, whether or not we're talking about sexual abuse, early child sexual abuse. Because what's really important, Jim, and everybody needs to understand this, is that as much as we all want the love and the connection, the relationship really needs to be the icing on the cake. And each of us, we need to be the cake. So we really need to have our act together. And also, with all the talk about relationships and mental health, I still find that people have really not the clarity that they need in terms of what ingredients actually go into a successful relationship. We need to become better educated about what we need to learn and what we need to do to never make a mistake in love again. And then, of course, my book, I did research with 450 people in the Providence, Boston area. And in 2000, my book, For Better, For Worse, Forever, was released, and I devised, and I know this doesn't sound sexy or romantic or lovey-dovey, but I devised a 10-step formula which actually teaches people how to assess, how to evaluate who's right for you and who's wrong for you before committing to any serious relationship. But the reality is that unfortunately, I feel that the majority of people, although we want love and we want connection, we're not willing to do the work, which is why we continue to go down this very depressing downward spiral when it comes to our relationship. But if people do the work,
if we can,
they can change the trajectory of their lives.
Right, exactly. Although one would want to believe, at least I
Yes.
that this couple was, however, if they weren't interrupted by the war, they would have gone ahead, married, and had been living happily ever after. But one never knows. You're right. Yeah. You're right. But let's turn to another couple clips, short clips here. With Nikki Giovanni, the poetess that just passed on, and this riveting exchange she has with James Baldwin.
Okay, let's hear it.
All I know that works in the world is a relationship.
Yes, all right.
Okay, that's all that's going to work. It takes two people to have a relationship.
Yeah, but the relationship.
If you don't have a dream, fake it.
But the relationship, you can't fake a dream.
You got to fake it, because we don't have dreams these days. How the hell can you have a dream? For what?
Well, it isn't.
So everybody's jiving, but let's jive on that level.
If I love you, I can't lie to you.
Of course you can lie to me, and you will. If you love me and you're going off with Maddie someplace, you're lying to me. Because what the hell do I care about the truth? I care if you're there. What Billie Holiday say, hush now, don't explain.
All right, I accept that.
Of course you'll lie to me, because I don't even want to care. What does the truth matter? And why are you going to be truthful with me when you lie to everybody else? You lied when you smiled at that cracker down the job, right? Lie to me, smile. Treat me the same way you would treat him.
I can't treat you the way I treat him.
You must. Because I've caught the frowns and the anger. He's happy with you. Of course he doesn't know you're unhappy. You grin at him all day long. You come home and I catch hell. Because I love you, I get least of you. I get the very minimum. And I'm saying, fake it with me. Is that too much of the black woman to ask of the black man? For 10 years, so that we can get a child on his feet that says, yeah, father smiled at mother. He talked to me about school today. Who cares that you can read or can't read? Most Americans can't read. Most people can't read. They look at the pictures.
Baby, I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I can only tell you about yourself as much as I can face about myself. It's happened to everybody who's tried to live. You go through your life for a long time, you think that no one has ever suffered the way I've suffered. My God. And then you realize you read something, you hear something, and you realize that your suffering does not isolate you. That your suffering is your bridge.
Mm-hmm.
That many people have suffered before you. Many people are suffering around you, and always will. And all you can do is bring, hopefully, a little light into that suffering. Enough light so the person who is suffering can begin to comprehend his suffering and begin to live with it and begin to change it.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So faking it, get in touch with suffering, what's involved, stop projecting it onto others. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. What initially strikes you here?
Well, she said it. She said it very clearly. She says, "I'm not getting enough of you," and therefore, if you need to fake it in order to make me feel seen and heard and loved, that's what I would like. However, that is really not going to work very well. The question is, what is it about his issues, his pain that continues to get in the way of his life and his relationships? And what is it about what's going on or not going on with the couple that is contributing to their disconnect? So, I have a mantra that I made up many, many years ago, and it is, we need to be willing to be honest and to acknowledge and address and resolve as best as we can, even though we can't change our histories, the things that continue to play havoc with our lives and our relationships. And obviously, this woman, is really wanting the connection. She's really wanting to be close. And for whatever reasons, he is unable to meet those needs. And he's saying, it's my pain. And, as I say to people all the time, then we have a responsibility to ourselves. And if we have a partner, to our partners and to our children, to deal with our issues so that we can actually be present and not.
But she is acknowledging what she needs. She's pleading with him. Fake it if you've got to.
Right.
Get in touch with your suffering.
Right.
Figure this out. And
yes, he needs to do it.
Walden respond the way he has. She whisked him out, and
he needs to do it. He needs to do it, and we all need to do it. If we have this pain, these issues that really do continue to get in the way of our own individual lives and our relationships. I mean, this is one of the beauties of being able to live, is to be willing to deal as best as we can with our demons, with our unfinished business, with our skeletons in the closet, so that we can actually live in the moment without having one foot in the past and one foot in the present. And yes, it does take a lot of work. And as I say to people all the time, we don't need to navigate these difficulties and the ups and downs of life on our own. And sometimes the very best thing that people need to do is reach out and get some really good professional help.
Yeah, and also perhaps join movements, because he's not only talking about individual psychic dilemmas and hurts of a people and the structural institutionalized racism that he's battling. Is, yes, you can get, and you should, you're able to get therapy, but we're talking about just a unbelievably large issue that one cannot tackle fully alone. But I get your point, but you do the best you can. And as she said at the beginning, as Nikki pointed out, what's all important is relationships.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. So she's right on in that. I think you agree very, very much so.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it really is. I mean, even Warren Buffett, talks about that the most important thing in our life is love and relationships and connection. And
into this on this. But I don't know Warren Buffett. Let's leave him. I hope that's true. I hope it's just more than
He did say that. He did say that.
But they say, all right, I get it. But you know what? I want to play another short excerpt, and this is by our friend Felipe Luciano. And this is his own original song, The Power of Love, A Heart for a Heart, by Norican poet. So this is very interesting. I listened very carefully to the words here, and I'd love to hear your comments. It's a very short.
Okay.
Okay.
Mood moss layers the trunk of my spirit today, a clumping together of things not said or done yesterday. And yet while I lie still in this old-growth forest, I smile at the warmth of your loving sunlight, marvel at the slinky way you sneak through these memory trees and thick branches of obstruction to lather me with layers of warm wind and whispers, a blanket of pretty yellow bubbles to protect the bark of promise that grows despite my indolence. I may lie still and make no sound, but I know what you're doing, and I love the massage. For me, today is simply today, but I know what it means to you. It is the day you were born, the day you live for. And while I feel weak and wounded and covered with pieces of dreams not finished, I rise early to stretch and roar to all the beings in my verdant world that you, that lovely little squirrel, are my love. And that you and only you can scamper up and down my trunk any time you want. And I will protect you from firestorms and foxes, boogly bears and wily wolves. They may laugh at us, my size, your tininess, but they know that we love each other tenderly. And so while I lumber through this forest in my grumpy vapors, and while you jump through the underbrush looking for God knows what, I revel in the fresh breath of this morning, this day, and shout enshrouding you in my strong leafy arms, Happy Valentine's Day, little big girl, 'cause every day is a love day with you, and I love that we love your day today.
Wow. I mean, love is your love day today.
Yes. Let me just say, Jim, let me just say, and I think that people really need to hear this, that it's not what we say, it's what we do. And I hear people all the time talking about how much they love, and yet their behavior is anything but loving. So love is a verb. I mean, love is also a noun. But what is really required, if love is going to work, is that you have to have people who are committed to behaving in loving ways every day. In fact, I have something here that I'd really like to read, is that any couple who has a healthy marriage that has lasted 20, 30, or 50 years did not stay happily married based off luck. They sacrificed. They forgave. They rebuilt trust when it was broken. They kept dating each other. Yes, dating each other. They listened. They apologized. They got help when they were stuck. They made time for each other. They learned how to communicate. They cared more about their marriage than about their pride. And I want to also add the importance of not letting your sex life go.
Yeah. That quote is from, do you have a citation for that?
I actually do, and believe it or not, I found it on Facebook, and it was written by a woman whose name is Diana Dunn, and I was really trying to reach her, but I wasn't able to find her contact information. I think it's beautiful. I think it's really important.
Well, we're actually going to be doing Diana Dunn is the wife of one of my very, very close friends, Jim Dunn.
Really?
years ago. Yes.
Oh
And
my.
we're going to be doing a show with one of their friends next month, well, I guess it'll be in February, about Jim's work, his organizing, help
I
us
have no
make.
idea. I have no idea.
Well, we'll connect you two because it is a beautiful piece and it's a
The
beautiful.
small world. Wow.
So we'll connect. Yeah, we'll have you on the phone with her and
Good.
you have her on your show too. Why not? But saying all of that, I really couldn't agree with you more. Action, being there, doing. You can have thoughts. But the bottom line is, what are you going to do with that? How do you express that in action?
Exactly. And look, it's not easy. No relationships are easy, and yet if people care enough, if they really care enough, hopefully they are going to do whatever it is that they need to do and learn whatever it is that they need to learn to ensure that the relationships are going to flourish. I think it's very easy. We get bored, we get boring, we let ourselves go, and it's always a mistake. And the reality is, as I've said before, Jim, is that we're not in a good place, relationships, and if people are serious, there is some relationship education. Of course, I believe it should begin in schools, probably in the first grade level, where kids realize the importance of working out problems and communication. But we're kind of going around in circles. And what I hear so often from my patients and friends is that people are starting to kind of give up on love, and I keep trying to encourage people to continue to try. I mean, people are falling in love and people are getting married, or whether they get married or not, they are having relationships, even though, as you quoted, marriage rates are down. People are marrying if they choose to marry much later, in life. But the fact is that it is possible to find and maintain and sustain a healthy relationship. So I don't want people to go down this doom and gloom tunnel. And it's easy to get there, especially if you've had a history of very, very disappointing, relationships.
Well, let me put on now the last 3 short clips from a couple, of course, that we're very, very fond of, and they certainly represent what you're talking about.
Yes.
And they've got well over a 60-year marriage, very successful, very loving, and still going strong. It's James and Carol Gilligan. And the 3 excerpts we're going to be listening to is of love, on love in the soul, to genuinely love someone, you must know them, and love and marriage, on how marriage can be many marriages. And you'll see them saying
Yes.
they've had 8 or 9. So
Right,
here's Jim Gilligan, psychiatrist Jim, and our psychologist Carol, on these 3 clips.
The human soul, the human psyche, needs love in order to survive, just as specifically as the body needs oxygen in order to survive. And for people who haven't been starved for love, that may not be the first thing they would think of. I mean, we kind of take it for granted that we get love from a lot of people. But if you have lived in an environment where you were starved for that, you're talking about a whole different range of experience. Just like with somebody who's starved for oxygen. I mean, most of the time we don't even think about the air we breathe. It's just the air we breathe. But when somebody's oxygen supply is cut off, you realize it's life-threatening in a very short time. Well, the same with the prisoners. They were like people whose oxygen supply had been cut off, but it was their love supply. And I realized that without love, the soul cannot survive. It dies. And that's what these men were telling me. Their souls had died. That's why they were capable of killing other people.
First of all, you know, if you really love somebody, that means you know them, because otherwise you don't love them, you love something else. So if you love somebody, you know them, and if you know them, you really know, and I think that's what part of love is that you want them to, you know, flourish. And so that's, if marriage does that, it's amazing, you know, to feel you live with that kind of knowing of each other and being known, and that desire to see one another be most fully, you know, sort of really themselves. And then that doesn't threaten the relationship. It's sort of ridiculous to think about that. You go through time. I mean, that's the other thing if you're in a long marriage, as we have been. You know, you could say, well, we've been in many marriages because it hasn't been one thing over time. I mean, and it has to be that way.
Yeah, we've had 7 or 8 or 9 different
right.
yeah.
7 or 8 or 9.
Yes.
So, okay. What's your take on these 3 short little clips?
Well, of course, we love Carol and Jim Gilligan, and they're amazing. I mean, they've been amazing professionally, and of course, amazing in their personal relationships as well. But it's true. I mean, relationships change over time, and the same kind of relationship that you have in the very beginning. I mean, they wish that it could sustain itself, you know, for 50 or 60 years, but there's going to be changes. They're right. Different stages, different kinds of marriages, you know, and Carol Gilligan was saying that in order to love, you have to really know your partner. And of course, that's true. I would add to that, in order to love, you really need to know yourself. And if you're finding that there are blocks, like, why can't I love? Why can't I give? Why can't I find somebody? Why can't there be the sort of connection that I would love? That's where our own work, Jim, our own internal work really then needs to take place. You know, maybe, you know, there's history there, you know, as Jim Gilligan was saying, you know, where we were starved for love, you know, growing up in our families. And these are the kinds of issues, even though unfortunately we can't change what didn't happen, that people have to be willing to emotionally process as best as we can, so that we are then free to be able to love, and that we are then free to be able to actually get to know our partner, so that we would then be able to find ourselves in a truly loving and healthy and functional relationship. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for a lot of people. A lot of people who've been hurt. They'll do 2 things. They'll either hurt someone else, or they'll completely recoil and basically just give up on trying to find that love connection that we all need. And I love what Jim Gilligan says. I mean, love is like oxygen, and in order to be able to live our lives well, We need oxygen and we need love. But let me just say that if people are not interested in a partnership and if they're not interested in marriage, there's still a lot of other ways to receive and give love. And you talk about being involved in social movements. Volunteering is another way that people can give love and receive love, and maybe having a dog or having an animal, sustains us. So I don't want people to think that the only way, that they can be happy and healthy is if they are in a partnership and if they are married. If that's your choice, that's fine. Then go about doing what you need to do to find that connection. But if that's something that you really and truly don't want and you prefer to live alone, there's a lot of other ways that people can make and sustain loving connections.
I agree with you. And to live life to the fullest, expressing your love. So it's not, doesn't have to be directed at any specific person.
Right.
Although it may include, but it's a love of life.
Right.
You put
Loving,
it that way.
loving and living on your terms and being able to figure out what are my terms. I don't want to be married. I don't want a relationship. I don't want to have sex. Okay. I mean, if that is in fact where you're at and you want to live an alternative kind of a life, that's fine, as long as you are being true to yourself, authentic and genuine, and that you're not making these choices based on escapism or on fears or on unfinished business from your history.
Or I would add, project your own fears and inner conflicts on others.
Right.
If you're, this is, I think, the tone of what so many people are dealing with in this country and around the world, for that matter. This hate, this venom, the violence, the put downs, the this, the that. It takes a powerful soul and ego to withstand the nonstop interaction that many of us are exposed to. So it's more. Jim Gilligan has an example that he has used about an inmate that he was dealing with, a very extraordinarily violent person who killed a guard in prison and all kinds of things. But it happened that another inmate entered into the jail situation there, and this extremely violent person who they didn't think would ever relate to anybody, took it upon himself, and it wasn't about any sort of sexual domination or anything, to protect this person and to be his friend. And even however hurt we may be, there are ways of expressing and showing that we're still part of the human race here and can
exactly. And I mean, there's so much negativity. A couple of weeks ago, I did a show and I was citing all kinds of women writers, who were basically saying, get rid of all men. There are no good men. And of course they're good men. There are wonderful women. There are wonderful men. And I think that the negativity, it just reinforces more negativity and depression and anxiety. And, we talk about even the Surgeon General in this country, we're in the midst of a loneliness epidemic, so that we're all really wanting and needing connection. It's just that we need, each of us as individuals, we have to figure out for ourselves what that means and what kind of a connection is going to maintain and sustain us and bring us happiness and joy and inner peace. And it's different for everybody.
It is. And I think being exposed, hopefully our audience, and you certainly brighten things up for us and for our audience, and me, of course, to show that one can be optimistic, and there is hope out there. And the clips I've tried to incorporate into our discussion here are some of it very painful, some of it is conflicted, but it is about hope and redeeming one's capacity to love. Certainly during this holiday season, but it should be year round, every day of our lives. And I know that's the sort of person that you are, and I try to be as much as possible. But I really do hope that this has been a positive experience for our audience, and I think you add a tremendously wonderful dimension to our understanding of it, so that we can have more fun in because it is about having fun too. Fun,
absolutely,
and joy, and music and sex, and not being so uptight, and so on and so on.
And it's also about getting away from all our devices. I mean, I've what I found in my readings, I mean, people are having, not as much sex as they used to. People are up in the middle of the night, watching videos on their computer. Even in my private practice, Jim, as you know, people tend to not want to come in. So we have to really be sure that, if we're wanting to find love and we want connections, that we're going to have to find ways to put ourselves out there rather than just sit in front of a screen. Yeah. So there's a certain kind of change and detour, I believe, that people need to be willing to take. Because I still believe you can meet people anywhere. And yet I was looking at singles events here in New York City, and what we're seeing is fewer and fewer in-person events. And there's a huge difference between the connection that people make on a screen than the connection that they make in person. So I want to encourage everybody to get out there and not be afraid to say hello, even though, yes, we know there's violence and there's all kinds of crazy things going on in our life. But there are good people, good men, and that, yes, it is certainly possible, and people are finding love every single day. And if you want it, go after it.
And even as a non-Canadian, I agree with you on that. As a seasoned New Yorker, absolutely. And that's why we're also not going to just watch Umbrellas of Cherbourg on the computer here. We're going to go down to the Film Forum weekend, and sold out already, I believe. And that's great. The more people should see movies like this, and that opens up their hearts and minds. And thank you. We're running out of time, unfortunately. Last year, we can follow you at Dan's Papers, which is now being published and sent in New York. You're on.
Yes. My website is beattycohan.com, and the Ask Beatty show on the Progressive Radio Network. It airs live every Monday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I've loved doing this with you, Jim, as I always have. And thank you so much, Freddie. It's wonderful to see you, Freddie, our producer. Yeah. And I just wish everybody a really healthy and happy and joyful holiday season, and also for 365 days of the year.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Freddie is more and more looking like the actor in that was playing opposite today.
Yes.
I mean, he's all right. Anyway, thank you, Freddie, and thank you all at M&M for
this is great. Thank you.
Thank you again. And again, this is Jim Vrettos. We'll see you next week on The Radical Imagination.